So, chances are you've been hearing about the Lindsay Clancy case. And I wanted to share a bit of perspective, not only as a mental health professional, but also as someone who has experienced extreme postpartum struggles with postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis symptoms. And I wanted to kind of just shed some light on what this looks like and what it feels like and how isolating and scary it can feel. Now, obviously, every case is different, and I don't know Lindsay. I don't know her family. I don't know her story. I'm obviously not her treatment team or her care team. But I do have personal experience with how deeply isolating it can feel to struggle with perinatal mental health and how scary it can be when you can't get the help you need. And there is a part of me, not only as a clinician, but also as a woman and a mother and a partner, who feels a very deep sorrow for this woman, for her family, for her children, for her husband. Um, and I feel a very deep fear for the community as a whole when we look at how perinatal mental health is handled. So, first off, not everyone will experience postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, or postpartum psychosis. However, perinatal and postpartum mental health concerns are very common. It does not mean it's normal, but it is very common to experience mental health struggles postpartum. It is also very common to have your concerns dismissed or ignored or minimized. And it is also very common to not seek treatment or help because you are either not in the right headspace to ask for the help you need, or because you are afraid. You are afraid of judgment. You are afraid of speaking the dark things out loud, or you are afraid of what the next steps will be. I want to be clear that this is not okay. Everything that happened with this case is not okay, and I'm not saying that. But I am saying that perinatal mental health and postpartum concerns need to be addressed, and they need to be taken seriously, and they need to be handled with compassion and love and gentility. I have treated many clients for postpartum depression and many clients with postpartum anxiety, and I have treated 2 clients with postpartum psychosis. And it takes so much courage and so much effort, and so much strength to even sit across from someone and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling and this is what's going on. Personally, I have 2 children, and after the birth of my first child, I experienced extreme postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression, and I experienced psychosis symptoms where I would have these vivid visual hallucinations where I would see my baby's face bashed in or caved in. I would see her head caved in. I would see her cold, lifeless, dead body laying in her crib. And none of this was true. None of this was happening. But these images would pop in my head, and they were so real that I would break into a panic, and I would cry, and I would sob hysterically, and I was convinced that she was dead or hurt or harmed in some way. And I couldn't even go bring myself to look at her to prove to myself that I was wrong. I would have to have someone else go look at her and tell me that she was okay. I would also hear phantom crying all the time. It didn't matter if she was asleep. It didn't matter if I was asleep. It was just this nightmare loop of just crying and screaming, and not even just a regular baby cry, but a baby in extreme distress cry. I didn't really even know how to put a lot of this into words, and it was so scary going on in my mind. And being my first child, I really was afraid to ask for help. I did eventually ask for help from my OBGYN, and they slid a paper in front of me and they said, check off these boxes. Do you have thoughts of harming yourself? Do you have thoughts of harming your child? Are you crying? Are you sleeping? Or all these things. And the things that went through my head was, well, what happens if I say yes to the scary stuff? What happens if I do that? So I didn't answer honestly. Now, to anyone on the outside, it was obvious I was struggling. I was losing weight rapidly because I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I was crying all the time. I was just an anxious mess, but because I wasn't saying the right thing, I wasn't saying this is exactly what's happening, I wasn't really flagged as a major concern. Um, for me, fortunately, it took about a year of just struggling immensely before suddenly the cloud just lifted and I was back to normal. I could sleep and I could eat and I wasn't crying as much, and these horrible hallucinations and visualizations weren't popping in my brain anymore. Um, but I didn't really get the help I needed. I just waited it out. Unfortunately for me, waiting it out didn't result in any major catastrophe. It just resulted in a year of suffering. With my second child, things got increasingly worse. So when he was born, not only did the extreme anxiety come back and the extreme depression come back, but I also had extreme suicidality. And the voices that were in my head from the moment he was born were telling me loud and clear, you and your children can't exist in the same world. So it's one or the other. Either they have to die or you have to die, because you can't both live in the same world. It can't exist. Now, those thoughts might not make sense to me, but they were loud and they were clear. And whatever this voice was telling me, you have two options. Either your children go or you go. Obviously, for me, I didn't have a desire or an intent to harm my children, but I ended up with an intense desire to harm myself. And I was afraid to be left alone. And I did voice these concerns and these thoughts to other people, to my mom, to my husband, to my sister, to my best friend, to a therapist. I went to a therapist. It wasn't a great fit, and I just didn't have the energy to go back, so I didn't. I did start medication. But there were times I was filling out basically a suicide book, and I would be, watching my baby sleep and my toddler play, and I would be writing all of these things that everybody around me needed to know to take care of my children when I was gone. And I told a very dear friend, this is the date I plan to kill myself. This is this is how I plan to do it. And, fortunately for her, she was really supportive in really what I felt was the best way possible. And she would say, hey, I hear you. And I'm not going to ask you not to do it, but I'm going to ask you, can we just push the date? Can we just keep pushing it? And, she really kind of just pulled me through day by day by day. But there were definitely times, I carried a kettlebell down to my community beach and was ready to jump off the pier with a kettlebell attached to me to drown myself. And I had a lot of support, fortunately, and I just wasn't left alone. My sister was with me, my husband was with me, my mom was with me, my best friend's mom, neighbors, somebody was with me at all times. And again, it really took me about a year to fully come out of this. And fortunately, in my case, nothing catastrophic happened. But this is what it looks like. It takes over your life and it consumes you, and it makes you so fearful to ask for help because you're so afraid to say the dark things out loud. And in this case and everything we're hearing about Lindsay, she was asking for help and she was getting help, and it just wasn't enough. And I just want to kind of humanize this narrative a little bit and help people understand that this is not about someone who just killed their children because they didn't want to be a mom. This is very clearly about someone who is struggling very deeply with an often misunderstood mental health diagnosis. And so as we're watching this unfold, I just ask that, we view it through a compassionate lens. Of course, the loss of these children is horrific and awful and heartbreaking, and these children should be honored and remembered for the beautiful lives and existence that they had. But let's also just be gentle as we hear the facts unfold and as we continue to see this case move forward. And let's all remember to check in with those we love. When we're talking about pregnancy and childbirth, the child is not the only new life being brought into the world. The mother herself is being born or reborn if it's been another child. And that new life, that new mom, she needs to be cared for too and protected and nurtured, because sometimes she just can't do it on her own.